Negotiators from the Marshall Islands and the United States have finally signed off on their Compact 3 deal, which is one of three 20-year multi-billion-dollar funding arrangements that Washington has with countries in Micronesia. The other two states, Palau and Federated States of Micronesia, signed their agreements earlier this year. But Marshall Islands has a unique bilateral relationship with the US, given the superpower's legacy of nuclear weapon testing in its islands. Kiroi Hawkins spoke with RNZ Pacific's correspondent in the Marshall Islands, Giff Johnson, shortly after the signing ceremony in Hawaii.
Yeah, the compact and a couple of subsidiary agreements were signed off by U.S. and Marshall Islands negotiators in Honolulu. Monday, Honolulu time, Tuesday, Marshall Islands time.
And starting with the big agreement, maybe backtracking a bit, why has this one taken so long? I understand the other two have been concluded. This is the final one. Is that right?
Correct. Both Palau and the Federated States of Micronesia signed off on their compacts in, I believe it was May. And what people need to understand is that there is no country in the region that has this particular bilateral issue with the United States, which is the nuclear weapons test legacy. This isn't a complicated issue, but it's a hugely important issue to the Marshall Islands, and it unfortunately still hasn't been properly addressed. But this was the Marshall Islands was trying to get the United States executive branch, the State Department and so on, to essentially come to the table and address the nuclear legacy in a partnership way, in a way that would be good for both the United States and the Marshall Islands. And the State Department just puts up the legal roadblocks. They just don't want to allow it to happen. So long story short, over the last maybe month or two, there's been a lot of work on other subsidiary agreements, okay? And these are really the meat of the compacts of free association for all three countries are the subsidiary agreements. And the overall agreement, the what they call the amended compact, this will be the second amended compact, because we had Compact 1, 1986, Compact 2 in 2003, and now we have Compact 3, is that gives the overall total funding and the basic framework. And then in the two subsidiary agreements that were signed today, one is a fiscal procedures agreement that describes like oversight and monitoring and management of U.S. funding. And the second was the trust fund agreement. And because they're changing the terms of the trust fund, because the U.S. is making an additional investment of $700 million into the trust fund, and instead of keeping it all in like the FSM and Palau, they just have locked their money away for another 20 years to let it grow. The Marshalls will be able to access some of the money that's been put in for various things to be determined. So that's the basic things that were signed off today in Honolulu. And I watched it, right? I watched the ceremony, and I mean, it was a big deal. And it was done at the East-West Center. The president of the East-West Center was there and opened it. She called it an historic agreement. The Assistant Secretary for Interior, who deals with the islands, Carmen Cantor, was there, and she spoke about how important this is. Foreign Minister Jack Adding from the Marshall Islands reiterated. And I think what was significant to me is it's a big shake hands and pat everybody on the back kind of a session with U.S. and Marshall Islands flags, and a whole bunch of people there and clapping, and that was one element of it. The other is that both Foreign Minister Adding and the chief negotiator Philip Mueller did raise the issue of the nuclear legacy, and it's clearly not resolved, even though there's some ability of the Marshall Islands to use some of the money for nuclear related things. It's just not really clear, and we haven't seen the documents, the black and white, so it's too early to really comment on what the specifics are. But it was definitely mentioned that this is the big issue for the Marshall Islands, is resolving the nuclear legacy.